Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Fantasy NFL Today with JP and Fitz. Unfortunately, JP and Michael Fiddle are going to be out this week, so it's going to be myself, Steve Vidovich, and Jared Fox will be taking over, giving you your fantasy start sit questions. So make sure you add them in the chat there, like and subscribe to our YouTube page so you can see all our amazing content. Whether it be football, basketball, or anything else that we're doing on SportsEthos YouTube. How are you doing today, Jared?
Doing great.
Yeah, excited for week 7 of football. We had our first big trade this week. Christian McCaffrey is going to be running for the San Francisco 49ers as the Panthers get even worse. We were talking about it before we hopped on live. They are laying, at least the last time I checked, they were laying 13 points at home to the Bucks. I think that was one of the games that you talked about in our fantasy preview that we do every week, where we cover all of the games on the slate. This week we got 4 pretty amazing teams on bye. So it's a little bit different of the slate. But what do you think about the 4 games you covered in that fantasy preview? Specifically, we could start with that Panthers Bucks game, which probably won't have much fantasy relevance.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see how the Bucks bounce back, of course, and to see if the Panthers even want to win this game. That's probably the big question. How much effort they actually put in.
Yeah,
the players want to win, of course.
Is going to be the running back one? Is it going to be Deontay Foreman, as a lot of people expect? You think Chuba Hubbard ends up getting a 50-50 timeshare, and it kind of negates either back?
I think this week it'll start as Deontay Foreman, about 60-40 maybe. Probably first and second down, maybe a third down. Chuba comes in, mixes it up, passes out of the backfield. But I would trust Deontay Foreman this week if I was forced to start one.
Yeah, but you probably want to stay away from both with the Bucks run defense, one of the best in the league. I think they're right behind the San Francisco 49ers for least fantasy points given up to opposing running backs. Any other games of those 4 early games that stood out to you from a fantasy perspective?
For me, the most exciting one for me was the Cowboys, of course. Big Cowboy fan, so.
Yeah, you're getting your good guy Dak back this week. What do you think of Dak starting in quarterback leagues as early as this week?
I think it's a must start. I go borderline top 5 quarterback this week. I think he's having a huge game.
Yeah, he has all of his weapons available. I believe Dalton Schultz is playing. Michael Gallup's in, obviously. CeeDee Lamb's in. So it could be quite a game for the Cowboys, especially going up against a pretty pathetic Lions defense that's given up the most points in the NFL through 6 weeks so far. So I like that. Start your Cowboys with confidence. Are you also including both Zeke and Pollard in that, or would you stick with Zeke?
Oh, Zeke for sure. I think Zeke will score. I think that'll be a huge game. Pollard will mix it in. He could have a good game. I'd flex him for sure if I needed to flex. I'd be confident with Pollard.
Okay, yeah. So we got our first question in the chat. If you guys have any questions, any start-sit questions, or any other fantasy football questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll get to them in order. So we got Josh. He's chiming in saying he needs to start 2 of Kenyan Drake, Garrett Wilson, and that's DeAndre Carter this week. Waivers, there's Moreau of the Raiders, Mac Hollins of the Raiders, Jerick McKinnon, Chase Edmonds, Darius Slayton, KJ Hamler, Zacchaeus of the Falcons, Hilliard, and Christian Watkins, Sammy Watkins. I'm sorry, Sammy Watkins. And NWI. Did you have an idea who NWI is?
That would be Nick Westbrook-Ikhine.
That's right. So out of those guys, he needs to find 2 starts. It's a guillotine league, so he's looking for help since his team is on the block to get chopped. So what do you think of those guys? Anybody on the wire? Who would you – I mean, I kind of like Kenyan Drake would be definitely one of the guys I would look to start. Garrett Wilson's a little bit boom bust. So, but I mean, all those guys on the wire, I definitely would steer clear of the guys on the Raiders myself. They're not of interest to me. I would say Kenyan Drake and probably Garrett Wilson would be my 2 picks there.
Same here.
I'd prefer to sit Wilson, but out of all those guys that you mentioned there, I think that those are the 2 best options. What do you think, Jared?
I agree. And I also think it's interesting with Elijah Moore sitting out this game. He's not going to be playing due to his trade request and denial. With Denzel Mims coming back.
Yeah, who also asked for a trade, right? I mean,
right.
it's funny how one guy who asked for a trade is now sitting out, and then the other guy who did ask for a trade in the past, he's coming back. It's kind of an interesting situation happening with the Jets receiving core.
I would trust Garrett Wilson for sure. I think he's a good starter. And Carter with Keenan Allen sitting out still, he could be okay, but I like Palmer in that situation a lot more than Carter. So yeah, out of those,
do we get word that Keenan Allen's out?
Yeah, I think he's out with the hamstring. They're on bye next week, and so as far as I know, he's out.
Okay, I was reading. I thought it was a game time decision, but maybe I haven't seen the latest on him. Let me take a look here. So Josh, I think that you go with Kenyan Drake and Garrett Wilson. Keenan Allen, it looks from Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, saying that he's a game time decision against the Seahawks. So there's a chance he plays, but with that game starting at 1 p.m., that's going to be a little bit of a tough one to gamble on, and that probably makes it a little bit more of a favor in Garrett Wilson. And also, I like what you said about Elijah Moore being out with the trade request. I think that helps Wilson's floor. And I definitely like Kenyan Drake. What do you think about Gus Edwards? You think that he impacts Kenyan Drake enough to where you'd want to put him on your bench if you had another option, or you think one more week of Drake being fantasy relevant in Baltimore before while Edwards shakes off the rust after being away from football for over a year?
Yeah, I think Edwards is a must-add. He should have been on our rosters anyway with the IR spot. If you had an IR spot, he should have been on your roster. And if you activate him this week, I wouldn't play him. But I think eventually over time, as long as Dobbins is out, Edwards will take over. I think so. I think he's better than Drake. He's showing the Ravens that he's their guy. They love him there. And I think Drake this week will be valuable. He'll be double-digit carries, could get in the end zone. But I think next week I would trust Gus Edwards. But this week for sure, I like Drake.
Yeah, so use Drake one more week. And it'll definitely be interesting to see Gus Edwards back. I'm very happy. It's always great to get a guy back who was out for such a long period of time.
Justice Hill is back, but Justice Hill, I wouldn't worry too much. He'll mix it into, may get 4 carries, 6 carries. It could be productive. Maybe a hot hand will keep him in. But I wouldn't worry too much about Justice Hill playing too much this week.
Yeah. There you go. And that's just what Josh was asking in the chat, is he's a little bit worried about Justice and Gus. So we're going to give you the advice to start Drake one more week with confidence before Gus Edwards likely takes over the backfield after this week. So the rest of your games of the slate, so you're talking about that Cowboys game. Do you like anybody on the Lions side? I know that we got word that DeAndre Swift is going to be out this week. Unfortunately, we're talking before the show again that the guy just can't seem to stay on the field. He's an electric fantasy player, both in the pass and the run game, but he just can't seem to stay healthy. What do you think about the Lions against the Cowboys? I know the Cowboys have quite the formidable defense. Do you like any Lions in that game?
Well, I love Jamal Williams. He'll be a huge factor. He may even catch passes this week with no DeAndre Swift in it. How sure are you about Montana St. Brown, Josh Reynolds? Have you heard anything? I haven't heard anything official yet.
On Josh Reynolds, I think I saw something earlier this morning. Josh Reynolds he's active this week. So it looks like he's going to play. Amon-Ra, I believe, is going to play. It looks like he was not on their final injury report, so I think they're both good to go. DJ Chark obviously is out. He was placed on injured reserve earlier this week. So anytime Amon-Ra is playing, you got to put him in your lineup, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And Reynolds plays too.
I'm sorry?
I would say Reynolds is also a good play too. And Hawkinson is fringy, but if you got to start there at tight end, then I would do it with confidence. A little shaky confidence, but
yeah.
Dallas has been they've been hard to score on. Fantasy points.
Yeah, absolutely. And the tight end landscape is so tough this year that Hawkinson is a reasonable play as a low end tight end one. Hopefully he gets in the end zone, and that's where he finds his value. So we talked a little bit about the Lions Cowboys game. We covered the Bucks Panthers to start. I know in our fantasy previews we cover every game of the NFL slate between our writers here at SportsEthos, and Jared is one of them. He did the 4 games on the early Sunday's card, so games that are going to be kicking off in just under 50 minutes. What about the other 2 games that you wrote about, either the Browns-Ravens or the Falcons-Bengals? Anything to keep note of for the game from a reality perspective or from a fantasy perspective that you're interested in of those 2 games?
Definitely the Falcons-Bengals. I think there's a lot of fantasy play in that game. Of course, the Bengals, the main guys for the Bengals. As far as how the Falcons will play this game, it's going to be tough. They beat the 49ers last week. 12 our surprises, but I'm expecting a sneak. Bengals are 6.5-point favorites, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons play them tough, keep it within the score, and maybe outright win. I like the Falcons.
Falcons have been such a surprise story this season. Been playing really good football. I watched them beat the 49ers last week. That was unfortunate for the 49ers, who I would like to pivot and talk about them because they're going to be a huge storyline this week, and that is Christian McCaffrey, CMC, gets traded to the 49ers. First huge trade of the season. You got a guy who is one of the most electric fantasy backs, electric reality backs, who is going to one of the most dynamic run games in all of football, and that's the 49ers behind Kyle Shanahan. While Christian McCaffrey is just getting to know the playbook, I would start him, not with the utmost confidence because Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to see quite a bit of the touches, but CMC doesn't need that many carries in order to deliver value. So while you're a little bit hesitant playing him when he just got traded on Thursday. Actually, we learned about the trade during Thursday Night Football, but you got to start Christian McCaffrey, not as an RB1 utmost confidence, but he's going to be in your starting lineup. Hopefully he sees enough opportunity in San Francisco out of the gate and finds the end zone. Gavin, we got a question from Gavin here. He has a reality question. What game are we most looking forward to watching this week? So, Gavin, I'm going to have to say that 49ers-Chiefs game. I think that's going to be a really, really interesting game. We actually have some running back news that we'll get to that impacts fantasy managers on the other side of that game on the Chiefs side. But I just love the idea of watching that really, really quality 49ers defense go up against one of the most dynamic offenses in football. I guess your cat might be interested in that game as well over there, Jared. But yeah, that's the game I'm definitely looking forward to is 49ers Chiefs. I'm really interested to see. I think that game's going to be won at the line of scrimmage. 49ers getting Trent Williams back. They're all-pro left tackle. We'll see how that goes. And they also get Nick Bosa back on the defensive line. I think that's going to make a huge difference. Very excited to see Christian McCaffrey. And then on the other side of the ball, it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic between Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We got word earlier this week that Pacheco is taking first-team reps in practice. It looks like he's the starting running back. And Jared and I were talking before the show about is it going to be a true starter's workload, or is it more of a starter in name sort of a thing? What do you think, Jared? On I would, first of all, I would steer clear of any backs against the 49ers defense. While the Bucks, we talked about them earlier, and they're really good against backs, fantasy backs. The 49ers have allowed the least fantasy points to running backs on the opposition. So regardless, pick up Pacheco for sure, but keep him on your bench if at all possible, because this 49ers defense is one to reckon with. What do you think, Jared? Do you think that it's going to be Pacheco start in name only, or you think that he's actually going to be seeing his starter's workload and CEH gets a few carries, if any?
Right. I think it's possible. It could be just a starting name alone, but his touches have increased week by week. Clyde's have been dipping. Clyde's been getting the more valuable touches near the end zone, but I like Pacheco this week to lead the team in carries, be the most productive running back for the Chiefs, and play a big role, both maybe the passing game and running. Clyde will still be involved with the running game, but he's the backup now, I think. So
I'd
start him.
You would start it. Would you put him like more of like a flex option this week, Pacheco?
Closer to a flex and RB2, but with our bye weeks, I think he's a good RB2.
Yeah, speaking of buys, we have quite a few really quality teams on buys this week. I think it's going to be probably the toughest week for fantasy managers with the Bills, the Rams, the Vikings, and the Eagles all on buys. Those are some explosive offenses with a lot of dynamic fantasy options. So, you make a good point that I really like the 49ers run defense, and it gives me a lot of fear. So if I had a better option, I would go, like, let's say Kenyan Drake. You would go Kenyan Drake over Pacheco?
Yes, for sure this week.
Yeah, so just because of the matchup, I agree with you there. But with it being a bye week, maybe you have a good point that Pacheco could be a interesting flex option, or maybe even RB2. So other games that I took on with the Sunday afternoon card, we're looking at the Raiders and the Texans, who are both coming off of a bye. I like the running backs in that game quite a bit. I love Josh Jacobs. I think that he could absolutely feast against the Texans. Damien Pierce is the best option out of all skill position players on the Texans. So I like him, not as much as Jacobs, but I like both running backs in that matchup. I also really like Devontae Adams, per usual. If I'm playing in a PPR league, maybe I look at Hunter Renfrow as a low-end flex because I think he's going to get a lot of volume, especially with Darren Waller out. But I love Jacobs this week. He's one of my favorite running backs on the slate. What do you think about that Raiders-Texans game?
Oh, I agree. I love Jacobs too. He's been great this year, getting all the touches. We kind of feared that he may lose touches to the rookie or Zamir White or the other slew of running backs they brought in. But it's all Jacobs. I think he should have a huge game, 20-plus carries probably. And same with Damien Pierce, you said. They're both, for me, RB1s this week for sure.
Yeah, especially with, you got Dalvin Cook is on bye. Among a handful of other running backs, I'd say he's probably the most impactful to fantasy managers. out of the RBs that are on bye, but I definitely love the running backs in that game, and you gotta always start Devontae Adams with confidence. So another game that I looked at in that Sunday late card is the Seahawks Chargers game. Do you have any initial thoughts on that Seahawks Chargers game today? It should be a pretty decent scoring game, over under 50.5, playing in San Diego. Anybody you like in that game particularly?
Oh, definitely. It's the highest over under on the slate, as far as I know. I love Kenneth Walker. Definitely RB1. I think he's gonna have a huge game. Him and the receivers. I like both. Start your Seahawks. Geno, Lockett, Metcalf, Walker, all of them.
You think Geno's going to get back to that QB1 status after a rough week last week?
I think so. The Chargers have been struggling defensively in the secondary with J.C. Jackson, the big payout they gave him, and he's been struggling, even getting benched last week. I'm looking for Geno to get back to making big plays on the field. He's been making great throws. He's been everything that we wanted Russell Wilson to be. So I'm excited to start Geno this week.
Yeah, and the Seahawks offensive line has been much better than I expected this season with two rookie tackles on each side. I've been really impressed with their offensive line play. I love Kenneth Walker. I agree with you. I actually like this is another game where I like both running backs because what's there not to like about Austin Eckler? He's, again, one of the most involved running backs in the passing game. He's got one of the safest floors in fantasy football, and he's got that upside, that 30-point upside. We've seen it a couple weeks this season. So start your running backs with confidence. Kenneth Walker looks like an early favorite for Rookie of the Year. So I definitely like both of the running backs there. I like your thought there about Geno getting back on track against a somewhat vulnerable Chargers defense. So I'd say start quite a few players with confidence. I know that Herbert doesn't have as many weapons. Josh Palmer's out, and we are thinking that Keenan Allen is going to be out. But I still like Herbert as a quarterback one this week. You can't bench the guy. So there's a lot of fantasy options here. Mike Williams is definitely a play. Gerald Everett in the tight end landscape is definitely not a must start option, but a definite start unless you got Kelsey or Andrews sitting there. So definitely like a lot of players in that game. I like what you said about the Seahawks receivers, Metcalf and Lockett. I believe Lockett might not play that one. So if that happens, then Metcalf is an even better play, but maybe I missed something and Lockett did get ruled in. But last time I checked, he was questionable heading into the game. So if you guys have any start-sit questions, any other fantasy questions, me and Jared are here to field them and help you guys win Week 7 as we get closer and closer to the fantasy football playoffs. We at SportsEthos, we put together fantasy previews and fantasy recaps of every game of the slate. So Jared took on 4 of the games from the early card that's going to kick off in just over 35 minutes. I took on the Sunday afternoon card. So you can go and check those out. We actually also provide free previews. So if you wanted to take a look at either of our articles, I believe, what was the game that we had out for free of yours, Jared? What was that first game that you wrote about in your article? I believe mine was the Jets Broncos. So if you want to check that out, totally free to everybody out there. You can go read a little bit more in detail of that specific game. And do you know which one that yours has for free, Jared?
I believe it was the Browns-Ravens.
Okay, and that's a great let's pivot to that game since I don't think we've talked much about that one. What do you like? Who do you like in that Browns-Ravens game?
Kind of tough. We're not really sure who's in and out as far as receivers. Bateman, as far as I know, he's in.
I believe Bateman's going to be back this week. Yeah, and I love Lamar this week with Bateman and Andrews. I think it really helps him, especially, you got Josh Allen is on bye. Jalen Hurts is on bye. So that's two of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league. So I definitely love Lamar Jackson in that matchup. I think that he has a definite chance of finishing as the QB1, even though I wouldn't pick him as my QB1 of the week. I think there's definitely an opportunity for that to happen.
Right, because especially with Mark Andrews is active, he'll play a huge role.
Absolutely, yeah. So go check out our fantasy previews. Also, if you guys are watching, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you can get all of our content, including our fantasy basketball content, which I'll be back here tomorrow with Joe to talk about weekly lineups for fantasy basketball. But right now we're talking football. I got Jared here. So we talked a little bit about the early games. If you guys want to go and check out our fantasy previews, we have a complimentary game or complimentary piece of every article that's given away for free. And in my Sunday afternoon card, I talked about the Jets Broncos, which has a much, speaking of over-unders, I believe it's the lowest of the slate at 38.5. There's not going to be a lot of points scored, especially, in my opinion, from the Broncos. Russell Wilson is out for probably a few weeks. Not that really impacts that many fantasy options because he wasn't really scoring that many points. Maybe Geno is the better quarterback. Crazy to say. But in that game, I really like Breece Hall, another rookie running back. I guess that's kind of like a theme of the show. We talked about Kenneth Walker, talked about Damien Pierce, now talking about Breece Hall, and he was the highest rookie selected in the NFL draft. He's absolutely exploded. I don't believe he's had a single week in single-digit fantasy points in PPR formats, except for week 1. And he's going to see the lion's share of touches. And while the Broncos have a good run defense, I think that Breece Hall is a really good play. He's not as great of a play as some of the other running backs that we've discussed in this slate, but I really like Breece Hall in this matchup. What are your thoughts on that rookie running back?
Yeah, I think he's set for a huge week. He's now playing ahead of Michael Carter, who he still factors in, but not as a main factor. Breece Hall should get the most touches. He's an RB1 for sure, especially in PPR formats. He's not quite awesome Eckler tier, but he's a step below for sure. I think he's having a huge game.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you there. And then we got Corey Davis and Garrett Wilson as kind of like your wide receiver options on the Jets. Like we talked about earlier, Elijah Moore is out because of his trade request earlier this week. Garrett Wilson could be a really good play this week. Corey Davis makes me a little nervous because it seems like Zach Wilson really likes getting the ball to Davis. And so it makes me a little bit nervous about Garrett Wilson, but I like Wilson as a flex option if you're dealing with bye weeks. Maybe you got Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp on bye, so you need to find a replacement. So Garrett Wilson would be the option there. Corey Davis also could be like a low-end flex play because of his connection with Zach Wilson there. But another thing is the Jets are going to run the ball, and they're going to do that early and often, which is why we both really like Breece Hall in that matchup. Anybody have any start-sit questions? You want to pop them in the chat there. We'll get to them today. As you can see, we are without JP and Michael. They'll be back next week to answer your fantasy football questions, but we got myself and Jared. Any other games in particular you want to talk about today, Jared?
We can talk about Pittsburgh and Miami. Seeing as Kenny Pickett, is he back? I believe he is.
Yeah, it's going to be the Steelers are a really strange team to me. I mean, they get absolutely shellacked by the Bills. What was it, 38-3 or something crazy? And then they actually won last week. So I can't get a read on the Steelers. Who of the receivers do you like in that game on the Steelers side?
Well, honestly, I think Claypool is coming around. He had a huge week last week, and I think he's starting to take over as Pickett's, or it wasn't Pickett, but I think he's starting to take over as Pittsburgh's main guy with Deontay Johnson kind of fading away a little. He hasn't really been targeted as much as he normally has been. He relies on volume. His entire game is around getting those 10-plus targets. So Claypool, he's one catch away from a really nice fantasy game.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. I'm a little bit nervous on the Pittsburgh receivers because it seems like a little bit of a carousel every week where one guy pops off, and if you get the right guy, you're going to have a good week. But how to pick which guy that is on a given week. I like your call on Claypool. I think there's a possibility maybe the Steelers even feature him a little bit more. There was some trade rumors in regards to Claypool, so maybe they want to feature a guy and then try to get as much value as possible on the trade market.
He runs too. He also gets the end arounds. He's involved all over the field. And Freiermuth, he's been coming around too. If you need a tight end start, he's for sure in play this week. Yeah.
So Freiermuth is coming off a concussion. He did practice this week, and I believe he's trending in the right direction. So I think he'll play. Same thing with Pickett. I think he cleared concussion protocol. So both of those guys appear like they're going to be options this week. What about the other side of that game, the Dolphins side? What do you think on that?
Tua's back, so let's fire up Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Both of them are receiver ones for sure in fantasy.
Absolutely.
Gesicki, he had a really good week last week. I think he's also in play. I like Freiermuth more, but I think Gesicki is definitely an option you can turn to.
Yeah, Gesicki's probably more like your boom bust option, where Freiermuth gives you more of like a safer floor. So I like that call there. Any other games that we want to hit from this slate? Do we want to talk Monday Night Football at all? Do we want to talk about some of the later games happening? Your thoughts, Jared? Do you have any other games you want to hit before we sign off for the day?
Colts Titans. That could be an interesting matchup here. Get Derrick Henry back finally. He was on bye last week. We missed him. But Michael Pittman for the Colts. I think he's a receiver one. Kind of like Deontay Johnson, more volume based.
Yeah, he saw so much volume last week.
Right.
Yeah, so much. Yeah, so I love that call there. Michael Pittman is probably one of the better wide receiver options on this slate.
And we get the running back show. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry. Taylor's back after missing the last 2 weeks. So be a running back battle, but with the way Matt Ryan threw last week, he threw over 50 times last week. Could be some good fantasy value. Yeah. Robert Woods could get more involved with Tannehill potentially throwing more off of the bye. So I'll be watching that game for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that call a lot. It'll be fun to get Jonathan Taylor back. It'll be fun to get Derrick Henry back into lineups. Definitely a lot of really interesting running backs on the slate. I feel like we've been talking quite a bit about the running back position in particular today. So we got a question here in the chat from Edward. Trade Kelsey and Ramondre for Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, and David Njoku. 12-man. This is a full PPR question, and he has Damien Pierce, but he's starting Dubs as his flex. I would actually recommend going Damien Pierce, even in a PPR format. I think he is the best skill position player on the Texans, and while the Raiders haven't hemorrhaged fantasy points to running backs like they have over the last decade, I like Damien Pierce quite a bit in that matchup. So I would actually advise to put Pierce in that flex spot and not Romeo Doubs. What do you think about this trade, Jared?
It's an interesting trade. Kels, of course, is the top tight end, him and Mark Andrews. So it's hard to move down from that. The difference between Kels and Njoku is pretty high, especially if you're going to compare like JT to Pierce or someone like that. But with the value you're getting JT and Brees and Njoku. Njoku's kind of the man out in this trade.
Yeah, I'm curious if you, Edward, if you have another tight end on your bench, or if Njoku would be your tight end one if you made this deal.
Oh, hey, Njoku, I think he's a low end starter, but going from Kels to Njoku is such a huge impact. It's a 12-team league.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what running backs he has, because if he has Damien Pierce that he's talking about benching this week, and Damien Pierce is a guy that I would want to try and get into my starting lineup. So if that's his situation, then maybe he's not as running back needy, and if that's the case, maybe you do keep Kelsey because of that positional advantage at tight end. I do like the idea of trading Kelsey, but I understand the hesitance because going from Kelsey or Andrews to any other tight end on the landscape is a huge, probably the biggest downgrade at any position in fantasy. So unless you're extremely running back needy, I would say keep the Kelsey side of that deal.
And Ramondre, but Damien Harris is back. He's active. Ramondre, I feel like, is the better runner, and he should be more involved. But with Damien Harris back, they're probably going to be starting to split like they kind of have been. Harris doing touchdowns too.
Yeah, and pretty crazy that Harris came back as quickly as he did. I mean, we were looking at like 3-4 weeks of being out, and he only misses 1 week. That
was the original report.
Right? Kudos to him, his work ethic and ability to get back on the field. I mean, it's impressive. But yeah, I do think I agree with you. I think Ramondre is the better runner. With Harris coming back from an injury, I think Stevenson's going to be way more involved than Harris this week. So if I'm going to start either of those guys, it's going to be Stevenson without a doubt. But yeah, I really it's an interesting trade. I like the idea of trading Travis Kelsey. If you're a team that is in desperate need of upgrading at the running back position, I would go for it. But if you don't, if you got Damien Pierce that you have the luxury of sitting on your bench this week, then I think you stand pat with Travis Kelsey as that positional advantage at tight end. So if you guys have any more questions in the chat, just post them in there. Also, like our YouTube channel. Let me try and do this here right over there. And you can check out our fantasy basketball content as well if you play multiple fantasy sports. I'll be back here tomorrow with Joe talking weekly start-sit decisions in the fantasy basketball landscape. But we're here to talk football. If you guys have any questions before we sign out, you can put them in the chat. Jared, any other closing thoughts for Week 7 matchup?
Well, I'll be watching my Cowboys for sure in the early slate. And
Dak comes back just in time, right? I think Dak comes back just in time. I think there's going to be a lot of offensive firepower in that game. That's definitely going to be one of the more probably fun games to watch.
For the Eagles on bye, we need a win.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and DeAndre Swift being out, I think, really helps as well. The Lions lose one of their most explosive offensive weapons. So
yeah, I think the Lions are they're like craftily losing. They're losing close games, making them watchable. They're watchable losses so that they can get the early pick, but still be entertaining for fans. The fans are still watching the Lions, and it's great for them right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for another edition of Fantasy NFL Today. You had myself. You can find me on Twitter at Steven Vinovich, and there's Jared's Twitter handle at Jared Fox. Come follow us. Like I said, we have our fantasy previews, fantasy recaps we put out every week. Gives you a nice little in-depth analysis on every game, pre-game and post-game. So, and we give free previews away. So come check us out. We'll be back next week. I believe JP and Michael Fiddle will be back. So you'll have your typical JP and Fitz. I might pop on, but you'll see myself and Jared throughout the season. Let's get another fantasy win, y'all. Week 7, getting close to the fantasy football playoffs. Hopefully we were able to help you guys win your matchups. Till next time.